I have an empty home myself at the moment, and it's just new to me. And therefore I thought, after I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to be a mom and just see what that's like. I don't know. People are good. People are open-minded, so much more than we would assume. That's just what I see. I believe people are wonderful. And I believe that people's minds are where they're going to be for us to be able to say, hey, this is our family, and you're going to find things that you really like about us. Christine Brown Woolley is literally doing something that Robyn Brown herself wished to do by herself, but she had to have others assist her to do it. What is that? Christine Brown is a best-selling author with the New York Times #1 on nonfiction hardcover as well as ebook into distinct categories. Christine begins in the second week at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. This is great for her truly, and she deserves it. Plainly deserves every bit of success, and I know she is going to be partying and receiving all sorts of accolades for this, and that is wonderful because her book has the ability to touch millions of women, instill hope, and also tell her story in her own words. And why I believe this is even better is because when Becoming Sister Wives was released, it was a bestseller in New York Times. They were on a hit television show. It was written by the entire family. But it was compelling because it was Robyn Brown, that wrote about this within the book. And I thought odd that she had written about this in the book prior to it ever occurring. But just read this to you, several years prior to marrying Kody, when I was at an absolute low point in my life, I compiled a life list of the things I wanted to do. Because things were going so poorly for me at the time, I permitted myself to dream big, change the world, meet Oprah, be the author of a bestseller, and have a business. Looking back on this now, I think be careful what you wish for because you may get it all and then it might be something you don't wish for. I can never overvalue the good influence of Sister Wives, but there are times when I wake up in the morning and tell myself, I don't want to do this anymore. I want everything to be back to normal. She was so caught up on things and things of esteem, celebrity, saving the world, almost lofty ambitions, and penning a bestseller. She fantasied about penning a bestseller before she ever penned a bestseller. And to be blunt, the book was a bestseller. But it wasn't until other perspectives were given that she achieved that. And she reminded everyone that she was last in the position of the favorite Sister Wives. Being on a TV show really changed my introduction into the family and into a plural marriage. Unfortunately, throughout the first season, most of our supporters stereotyped me as a homewrecker who wanted to ruin Meri, Janelle, and Christine's harmonious family. I don't like to waste too much time thinking about the internet chatter, but as I believe responding to our viewers matters, I just can't totally ignore it. There have been so many negative remarks regarding me that it's hard not to brush them off. Others think I have ulterior motives, and that I'm keeping Kody to myself and not due to love of the family or the sister wives. Others think I'm conniving and manipulative. I often come in last place in the favorite sister wife survey. It's strange that when she had the world on a silver platter and she was receiving so much attention, all she could think about was the negative. She won fame, monetary security. She got the man. She got the babies. And all she's complaining about is that people don't like her because they believe she's manipulative and cunning and not the favored sister wife. She confesses to manipulating her producer and say to them that they need to tread carefully so as not to give America's women yet another reason to despise me. If the public does not like me, then we had failed on our purpose of sharing the joys of the stability of our life. She meets Oprah, she writes her book, she has it all that she desires. And still, in that, she was not happy. And though she had stated people thought all she wanted was Kody all to herself, in the end, all she had was Kody all to herself. And she wanted to write the bestseller. Sure, Christine's motivations were a lot different than Robyn's. And what's particularly interesting is in the chapter on celebrity for Christine. And I'm not going to go back and read it, but her motivation for being on the show was not fame. It was not celebrity. It was not to meet Oprah. It was not to change the world. It was she had lived her whole life in fear of the outside, in fear of what others thought of her. In fear of the police, in fear of her family being torn apart. She had lived a life of lies and having to lie to those surrounding her. And she was done living two lives. She wanted to be in the spotlight and reveal to the world what her family was, and not like they are not monsters. Like, we are not these bad guys that Warren Jeffs is. She wanted to bring to light the community to minimize damage in some way. Her motivations were not based on fame, and they certainly were not based on the celebrity aspect or writing a bestseller like Robyn. They were more about so she could live in a more free world so that her children could live in a more free world. And she spoke about how the show, while challenging and having to learn about the media training, she described learning media training from her experience at Principal Voices, where she studied how to respond to questions and just respond enough, but don't go too deep on the surface to provide enough of an answer, but just don't go deep, which is what she's been doing for years and years. She's been trained to just give you the high level. And in the end, she penned our choice to live openly has enabled our whole family to be themselves. I enjoy getting to know all of the kids' friends, and I just adore taking my sister wife's kids out and introducing them as my children. I like being honest and being married to Kody, and we do a lot of things as a married couple, and he can freely state we are all his wives. It's nice traveling somewhere with him and being known. People greet us and discuss us and how we change their minds and their outlook in families and relationships. I feel grateful and delighted at how people respond to our family. People thankful that we made our lives open so they could observe this plural family as an option. Now, so Christine's reasons were more driven by advocacy and based on assisting be more open. Although to some extent that transparency was a little white lie, and in her regime, she did not know quite how much of a white lie it was. She was fulfilling her duty, and she was at that point believed what her life was a happy one. If you read the book, you discover that some of those earlier moments were not the easiest. You find out that Christine, even though she was talking about all these nice things about what was happening in the family, behind closed doors, it was much darker and much, tougher than they admitted to on the show. The show had an agenda, and that agenda was to get people not to hate polygamists. The second reason was an attempt to decriminalize it such that people would not be afraid to report abuse within their communities. So, eventually, their way forward where they were going to attempt to speak out and say it was a civil rights issue and polygamists are entitled to the civil right to live their religion did not pan out. And instead, they decriminalized it on the basis of abuse. And that if individuals are cohabiting in polygamy with consenting and there is no other form of abuse, the state of Utah will not send them to prison on a felony. It would simply be a violation like a parking ticket or a parking speeding ticket. But if there were crimes committed that were abuse, child trafficking, sex abuse, all of those at that time, then it would have been a felony, a secondary felony. So their work certainly did start a conversation, but also, normalized a community that perhaps didn't need to be normalized in the first place. All that she's been through and every aspect of her life and all that she has said and done on this show and to the world, there are moments where some of the things that she says are just so polarizing. People are like, what are you even thinking, Christine? And then there are times when other people just love her and she knows that her bubbly, happy personality makes her an easy person to like and makes her an easy speaker for the family. And that clash between Christine is really the reason they got the show because she was doing work in Principal Voices. They wanted a perception of how to make it appear that women were not being repressed, and Kody was essentially handed the show later on due to Christine's efforts. And I believe in a lot of ways Christine knows how important she was to getting the show, and how her work and her advocacy with Principal Voices was the driving force for them to be able to get the show. That I can see why she feels a sense of ownership with the show. Not that it's her show, but she does state in her book that Kody just always says that it was his show and the story was about him, and she never believed that. She considered it more of a family. It's difficult to like in a system such as that, the show itself was a man and for wives, right? So he was the hub of it and all the women orbit the man. So perhaps, the show's about Kody, but It wasn't really, and it still isn't, and No, we're not to compare the women, and we're not really even supposed to make this about revenge. But sometimes when you've experienced a really difficult time and you've had a very abusive ex who used and abused you and used your children and discarded them, sometimes the best revenge you can have is success, right? And the ultimate confirmation you can receive when you publish a book is that it's a bestseller, a New York Times bestseller. To qualify for the list, you need to sell over 5,000 copies in a week, which I know sounds crazy because what? Only 5,000 copies. But, in the old days, that was a lot. Hardcover books, it's difficult to sell that. A great many more books never reach that 5,000. It's unbelievable if you think about it. But they then also need to have not only 5,000, but then they need to fulfill some other qualifications. It's all in relation also to the effect of this in the other releases. We've had other individuals who've been on the show achieve New York Times bestsellers. And of course, if you are a celebrity and you've got a huge fan base behind you, you are better suited and you're more likely to make the New York Times bestseller. I think to a lot of people, this book and this success for her is just a benchmark for her and her ongoing independence. No matter what you believe or perceive about the show and what it did and how it damaged or didn't damage, or what you think regarding the exploitation that might or might not have happened on a show when you're profiting off your family, or what you feel about polygamy. Christine's arena now is placed not to be about secrets anymore and more about candor and transparency. And although not every member of her family sees own honesty and openness as a value, and although not every member of her family wants to put it all out there and share, she had the courage to do so, and she's being vulnerable and sharing a lot about her life she never had to. If I can think of something that I believe is most likely the first priority in her book from my point of view, particularly when handling first-year very conservative fundamentalist religions such as this one, is her honesty in talking about sex. And I think it's a subject that is so forbidden in this culture, and even within fundamentalism in general, that the fact that she would even open up the discussion and talk about how painful her first experience was, how much she felt like she was injured, that Kody didn't care how emotionally removed she felt, how she felt like Kody didn't want to see her naked. He wanted her always dressed, talking candidly about how broken up she was when she could hear him having sex with the other women in the room next to her, and genuinely breaking down the way he was so sex-driven and so selfish with regard to sex that I think is part of the show that we've never really seen. But it's part of this culture that is an important one to reveal. It shocked a lot of people when they learned that Kody did not care about foreplay, and he didn't want to, massage her, and he didn't care if she was, attended to sexually. That is literally what this culture is. The women are objects. I don't know how many women from this culture have told me about their first time and felt raped. And years later, they say those very words. Or they say something to me about learning as a youth in their teens that they don't deserve to like sex, that if they like sex, then they're a sinner, and they should let their husband just do what he wants with them. They can't say no. They don't, and then they can't protest. And if they like it, then they learn to BS their sinners, okay? So you are not supposed to like it, which is putting these women in the position of accepting abuse in the bedroom. If you put that with what she said about her first time and what Kody did, it is in accordance with their teachings. If you put that with Robyn shaming her because she didn't want to do things for Kody that she was willing to do, it is back in line with their teachings. And honestly, what she does with this book is she's opening up that entire conversation wide. She doesn't need to tell you that this is what she was indoctrinated in. She doesn't need to say this was marital rape. But for a lot of you who read it, that's what you took away. And what you knew when you read it is this woman's been through hell. She's being so vulnerable, and she's exposing the most hurtful aspect of her marriage and her life. And now she alone is a New York Times bestseller. And she alone and her vulnerability are what allow her to get there. Not the fact that she happens to be well known, but because she is vulnerable. And I know many of you have enjoyed that about her book. As much as we go back and forth and we discuss the dynamics of the family and maybe Christine's back and forth with Meri or even her back and forth with Janelle or her back and forths with Robyn and Kody. Ultimately, all the women are victims. All of them. Even Robyn to even Robyn. And what Christine's book leaves no doubt about is that she's happy to be rid of the control and the repression that she experienced under Kody, and that although she thinks Kody and Robyn are still like the best, you know? And they're the soulmates, the manner in which she describes Kody and Robyn's marriage and how much Robyn does walk on eggshells with Kody. It actually proves that although Robyn did win the husband, it was actually the women that left Kody that won at life. Robyn may have a house full of items, but she at the end of the day still has an abusive husband, a controlling husband, an isolator husband, and a manipulative husband. She may be too, but in their world, Kody is king, and Robyn treats him as such in order to get what she wants. The true son of a woman is standing firm against adversity, against the thought of if I do this, people will think that I'm a phony. And she did that courageously, and she's done that fearlessly, and is even at times when I may not agree with her, I admire her for doing this. Therefore, kudos to Christine for defying the odds, becoming a best-selling writer, New York Times best-selling writer, and showing that when your aspirations are advocacy and altruistic, you will gather people who support you and your fan base aside from other people whose aspirations are fame and fortune. Such as Kody and Robyn. That is a big victory for her. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you have not subscribed and hit the bell so that you never miss a video. Thank you so much for watching.